Hello, tonight's story, Women in War, the Forgotten Heroes of History, is about to begin. If you find that these kinds of storytelling videos help you relax and fall asleep peacefully, feel free to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, if you're ready, turn off the lights and create a calm, cozy atmosphere around you, with the gentle crackling of the fireplace in the background. Let's begin this immersive story. For centuries, the pages of history have been inked with the aid of the hands of men. For guys, about men. From marble statues to historical manuscripts, the memory of war has been sculpted into a narrative of masculine glory. But in the back of the smoke of battle and below the iron helmets, females marched, strategized, healed, and fought. This chapter is a trip backward, long way past the modern day battlefield, into the center of ancient civilizations, the place female warriors walked amongst kings and generals. We, not with Joan of Arc or the females of World Battle II, however, with the fierce queens of Africa, the steely nomads of the Eurasian steppes, and the long-silenced voices of women whose valor echoed throughout empires. No dialogue about old women warriors can begin without addressing essentially the most famous of all of them, the Amazons. For hundreds of years, these fierce, horseback-using feminine fighters have straddled the road between legend and truth. But were they actual? Greek historians, primarily Herodotus, described a tribe of women who lived independently of guys, hunted, fought, and bore hands like their male counterparts. Although the Greeks painted them as barbaric outliers, archaeological findings from the Eurasian steppes, primarily among the many Scythians and Sarmatians, advocate that female warriors did correctly exist. Graves uncovered in what's now Ukraine and Kazakhstan have revealed skeletons buried with weapons and war wounds, ladies who clearly lived and died as fighters. The photograph of the Amazon was once likely stimulated through these real females, horse archers who hunted and defended their tribes, knowledgeable from childhood to wield bows and ride horses with breathtaking skill. Two Greek guys, such females have been each intriguing and terrifying, prompting myths of warrior queens, like Penthesilea, who fought within the Trojan War. Within the 6th century BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Quality set his attractions on the Massagetæ, a nomadic tribe led by using a bold queen. What followed was once, now not in basic terms, a story of resistance, however considered one of vengeance that has echoed for millennia. Cyrus attempted to trick the Massagetæ by means of proposing a marriage alliance, a approach customary in old politics. Tamiris noticed through the deceit. When Cyrus then tried to ambush her army, he captured her son, who tragically took his possessed lifestyles in captivity. Enraged, Tamiris launched a ferocious counterattack. Her forces overwhelmed the Persians, and according to Herodotus, she had Cyrus's physique decapitated and his head plunged right into a bag of blood. Tamiris used to be not purely a ruler, she was a warrior, a tactician, and a symbol of maternal fury turned military genius. Her story is rarely advised within the equal breadth as Alexander or Caesar. However, her legacy opponents them in scale and savagery. Not like the ladies of Athens who had been relegated to domestic spheres. Spartan ladies were raised with a warrior's spirit. At the same time, they didn't fight on the front lines. Their position in Navy society was once fundamental. Spartan women expert in bodily schooling, patience, and discipline. They had been taught that their hour bodies were to undergo robust suns, and that their voices would task even kings. When Spartan men have been away repeatedly for years, the females managed estates, enforced legal guidelines, and in lots of methods, kept the army state functioning. A noted Spartan announcing captures their mindset. Come back with your defender on it. Though they didn't wield swords in combat, Spartan women contributed to warfare in a way hardly ever stated, with the aid of cultivating a society where battle was life, and every citizen, male or female, used to be its servant. In 480 BCE, at the notorious naval battle of Salamis, the Persian fleet faced off towards the Greek forces in a conflict that would shape Western civilization. Among the many commanders was once a girl, Artemisia I of Caria, combating underneath Xerxes. She commanded 5 ships and validated naval methods that outmaneuvered the Greeks. According to Herodotus, even Xerxes himself exclaimed, "My guys have turned out to be females, and my women, men." Upon witnessing Artemisia's effectiveness, Artemisia was once now not a token chief. She was once deeply revered, consulted, and feared. Her political acumen, maritime skill, and ruthless pragmatism proved that vigor on the seas did not require a beard or a crown-best vision and mettle. Rapid forward to West Africa, where the dominion of Dahomey in present-day Benin fielded certainly one of history's most uncommon all-female military units. Dubbed the Dahomean Amazons by way of European observers, these women were not auxiliary opponents, they were the king's elite look-after. Expert from a young age, these females underwent brutal bodily regimens, weapons training, and mental conditioning. They fought in direct combat, performed raids, and have been recognized for his or her FEARLESS NESS. Within the 19th century, when French colonial forces invaded, they encountered fierce resistance from these ladies. Although outgunned and eventually defeated, the Dahomey Amazons left an indelible affect on all who faced them. Historical Rome, with all its pomp and patriarchal pride, nonetheless produced women who shattered norms. Female gladiatresses were rare, however, not unknown. Inscriptions and sculptures exhibit ladies who fought in the area, cheered via crowds, blanketed in blood and sand. Though possible considered novelties or spectacles, these females educated and bled like their male counterparts. Meanwhile, in the provinces, ladies like Boudica, the queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain, rose in open rebellion against Roman rule. After her daughters were violated and her persons humiliated, Boudica raised a navy, burned Roman cities, and slaughtered 1000s. Though eventually defeated, her rebellion shook the empire's foundations. Why have been these women brave, incredible, bloodied, pushed into footnotes, or erased totally? Patriarchal societies in general managed the narratives of the past. Historians, philosophers, and scribes rarely saw females as equals, led by myself, warriors. Their reviews had been rewritten, or buried. Myths replaced memory. Silence changed legacy. The medieval era, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was a time of inflexible social roles, particularly for females. Church doctrine and feudal legislation prescribed subservience, obedience, and modesty. Women were to be pious mothers, dutiful better halves, or cloistered nuns, and yet, conflict relentless, ingesting left no room for purity. When kingdoms fell, women rose. When sons died, mothers led. When guys went off to battle, women defended what remained. In this contradiction, historical past was made. This chapter explores the ladies who defied the cultural norms of their age, who led armies, fought in armor, and modified the course of empires. Perhaps no lady of the medieval period is extra celebrated or more misunderstood than Joan of Arc. Born in 1412 to a peasant loved ones in Domremy, France, Joan claimed to acquire divine visions, instructing her to aid Charles VII and force the English from French soil for the duration of the 100 Years' War. At simply 17, she donned armor, reduced her hair, and rode into battle on the head of French troops. Her affect was immediate. On the siege of Orleans in 1810 by Archduke, Joan's leadership and morale helped carry town spirits and switch the tide. She fought in several extra engagements and witnessed Charles's coronation at Reims, but her upward push used to be too speedy, her identification too threatening. Captured by using Burgundian allies of the English in 1430, she used to be handed over to the Inquisition, accused of heresy, past-dressing, and witchcraft. Joan was once burned on the stake in 1431. She was once only 19. Centuries later, she was once canonized as a saint. However, her story, for all its glory, reveals a tragic actuality. Females could fight. However, not often had been they forgiven for it. Even as Joan is iconic, many noblewomen led troops long earlier than her. One such figure used to be Matilda of Tuscany, born in 1046. She was once a robust feudal lord in northern Italy, fiercely loyal to Pope Gregory VII during the investiture. Controversy, a bitter clash between church and emperor over manipulative appointments. Matilda was no passive aristocrat. She commanded armies, led sieges, and held castles underneath siege herself. Her navy campaigns against the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV earned her each appreciation and fear. Despite being one of the most strong women in Europe on the time, her name is hardly ever taught in faculties, but without her, the papacy's resistance would have crumbled. Moving northward, we discover ourselves among the many icy fjords of Scandinavia. where Viking culture flourished between the 8th and 11th centuries. Although Viking society used to be deeply patriarchal, sagas and burial evidence endorsed that women did take part in fight, notably as shield maidens. Historic Norse sagas mention fierce women like Lagertha, a warrior who fought alongside the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, though some money owed are mythic. Archaeology has printed graves of Viking women buried with weapons, including one in Birka, Sweden, in the beginning assumed to be male, except DNA tests verified in any other case. These findings assignment the long-held assumption that Viking ladies were simply domestic. In times of need, or by means of alternative, they grew to be warriors. Throughout the Islamic world, too, women weren't completely absent from war. One of the crucial hanging examples is Kala bint al-Aswar, a 7th century Arab warrior who fought throughout the early Muslim conquests. A modern of the Prophet Muhammad, Kala used to be renowned for her valor. She disguised herself in armor to combat beside her brother in the fight of Agdain. So fierce was her combat that enemies concept she used to be Khalid ibn al-Walid, the famed basic. She reportedly led cavalry expenses, rescued prisoners, and fought in key battles from Syria to Persia. Though her legend has grown with time, she stays a cultural icon in the Arab world. Eleanor of Aquitaine lived a life that would fill an Aclete epic. Born into immense wealth and vigor, she married not one however to Kings Louis VII of France and later Henry II of England, but Eleanor used to be more than a royal consort. In 1147, she joined the Second Crusade, an exclusive decision for a queen. She traveled to the Holy Land, dressed in armor though now not necessarily combating, and performed a political and logistical position within the crusade. Although the campaign failed, her presence shattered norms about what a queen would, or will have to be. Later, she dominated the enormous Angevin Empire while her sons were on crusade. She told, negotiated, and even raised armies in the course of her long and elaborate reign. Conflict came not simply to battlefields but to castles, towns, and villages. And when it did, women on the whole grew to become the final line of safety. For the period of the siege of Weinsberg in 1140, the city's females negotiated give up, as they have been allowed to leave carrying best what they could lift. Cleverly, they carried their husbands on their backs. The besieging army, impressed by means of their loyalty and wit, let them cross somewhere else. Noble women, akin to Nicola de la Haye, defended Lincoln Fortress against rebels in 1216, keeping out until King Henry III's forces arrived. Her efforts had been so critical that she was named Sheriff of Lincolnshire, the primary girl in English historical past to maintain this sort of position. On the opposite facet of the world, in Japan, women of the samurai type were trained no longer most effective in etiquette but in martial arts, chiefly the use of the naginata, a curved pole weapon ultimate for protection. Figures like Tomo Gozon, who fought in the Genpei struggle 1182-1185, weren't most effective warring parties however, celebrated heroes. Tomo used to be described as a warrior valued at 1,000, equipped to confront a demon or a god, established or walking, although later periods pushed samurai women into domesticity. During war for torn centuries, they defended houses, led troops, and committed acts of great bravery. The center, a while, were not typed to females, yet across continents, faiths, and cultures, women rose to fulfill the moment. They weren't perpetually allowed to guide, but they located approaches to do so. They weren't constantly famous as soldiers, however they bled like them. Many died in anonymity. Some had been in stone or scripture, but all left in the back of a legacy that refuses to remain buried. The rise of professional armies and early later statehood in the 16th and 17th centuries marked a dramatic shift in battle. As standing armies grew and self-discipline grew to be the hallmark of battle, females' direct participation seemed to decline, but appearances were deceiving. Ladies were no longer simply stepping onto medieval battlefields. They have been adapting to a thoroughly new warfare environment. They served as spies, guerrilla combatants, nurses, propagandists, and even disguised soldiers in male regiments, and routinely they commanded outright. This chapter tells the experiences of women who navigated the brutal and bureaucratic world of early modern conflicts, some through breaking the rules, others via rewriting them. In 17th century Angola, amid the violent chaos of Portuguese colonial enlargement, Queen Nzinga Mbandi rose as a logo of resistance and resilience. born into a royal loved ones in the kingdom of Ntongo, Nzinga grew up for the duration of a time of encroaching European influence and slave raids. When her brother's management faltered, she took the reins of diplomacy, negotiating instantly with Portuguese officers, famously sitting on a servant's back after they refused to provide her a chair during peace talks. But diplomacy used to be only the starting. After assuming the throne in 1624, Nzinga restructured her kingdom, cast alliances, knowledgeable, a reputable military, and led a long time of guerrilla conflict towards Portuguese forces. She adopted male costume, kept a feminine bodyguard corps, and dominated with army precision. Until her dying at 80, she fought both on the battlefield and on the bargaining desk. As struggle became more professionalized, it additionally became extra exclusionary. Females had been legally barred from serving in most armies. However, that didn't stop many from discovering methods to enlist. The most usual process, hide. Throughout Europe and the Americas, hundreds of documented circumstances tell of women who reduced their hair, certain their chests, and enlisted under male aliases. Deborah Sampson disguised herself as Robert Shutcliffe and fought within the American innovative conflict. She served for over a year earlier than her identity used to be learned after a battlefield wound. Hannah Snell, a British lady, enlisted within the Royal Marines within the 1740s and fought in India. She was once best learned after returning to England and revealing her story, publicly becoming something of a celeb. In the Netherlands, Catharina Marguerite the Link dressed as a man and fought in more than a few small-scale conflicts. Even though her story led to persecution for her gender non-conformity, one of the most devastating conflicts in European history, the 30 Years' Battle, 1618 to 1648, laid waste to a lot of vital Europe. It wasn't a single battle, however, a rolling catastrophe, religious, political, and deeply personal. Women suffered vastly, however. Some grew to become the tide. Countess Elizabeth of Nassau, referred to as the Girl of the Palatinate, led remedy efforts, managed fortifications, and rallied Protestant forces for the period of sieges. Mary Ward, an English Catholic nun, labored behind enemy strains, founding secret devout schools for women and sheltering the persecuted, her mission fitting a type of non-secular war. Peasant females throughout Germany and Bohemia fashioned militia agencies to preserve villages towards marauding armed best with farm instruments and righteous fury. Their stories more often than not go unrecorded, no longer on account that they lacked braveness, however, due to the fact that history couldn't discover a box to position them in. Although we touched on them in Chapter 1, the Dahomey Amazons truly came into their possess in the 18th century. Beneath King Halkbadia and later King Gesbo, this elite corps of feminine warriors multiplied to hundreds. Their recruitment was once rigorous. Many had been orphans or unmarried women with no ties to male relatives, ideal candidates for a life of absolute loyalty to the king. Armed with muskets, machetes, and an unshakable experience of obligation, they patrolled borders, overwhelmed revolts, and went toe-to-toe with colonial forces. Their courage, self-discipline, and ferocity made them one of the crucial, powerful combating forces on the continent. Whilst the Ottoman Empire is quite often perceived as deeply patriarchal, some Ottoman females played stunning roles in conflict exceptionally during sieges and border protection. For the period of the 2D siege of Vienna in 1683, European women took up palms beside guys to defend the city. In the meantime, within the Ottoman-controlled Balkans, Christian and Muslim ladies alike grew to be involved in guerrilla resistance, nursing wounded opponents, hiding weapons, and even conducting espionage. Studies are instructed of Turkish noblewomen organizing security parties inside forts, holding the line when garrisons fell. Though such stories are scattered, they propose that female participation in struggle was extra general than Ottoman chroniclers admitted. As colonial tensions exploded into revolution within the Americas, females once more stepped ahead, now not just as supporters, however as strategists and combatants. In Latin America, Manuela Scenes, lover and comrade of Simon Bolivar, risked her life to undercover agent, battle, and even stop Bolivar from assassination. She used to be eventually exiled, her contributions erased for decades. In the USA, Molly Pitcher, seemingly a composite of a few females, together with Mary Ludwig Hayes, famously took her husband's location at a cannon for the duration of the combat of Monmouth. Although shrouded in legend, Her story captures the spirit of ladies who didn't look ahead to permission, they acted, and among indigenous international locations resisting European invasion, numerous warrior women like these of the Cherokee, Iroquois, and Mapuche fought for survival and sovereignty. If official armies rejected them, some females discovered conflict on the fringes, on pirate ships, in insurgent bands, or main slave revolts. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, two infamous pirates of the early 18th century, sailed the Caribbean disguised as men, wielding pistols and cutlasses, combating alongside male crews. Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of era, defied British rule within the 16th century, commanding a fleet of ships and negotiating instantly with Queen Elizabeth I. in Jamaica and Suriname. Enslaved females led and fought in Maroon uprisings, together with the legendary Nanny of the Maroons, a guerrilla leader and strategist who remains a Jamaican countrywide hero. The early modern interval used to be a crucible. Faith, empire, revolution, and enterprise reshaped the sector. By way of all of it, ladies fought now, not only for countries, however for dignity, survival, and situation. They have been queens and rebels, nurses and spies, pirates and patriots. Their weapons ranged from muskets to ink, their battlefields, from courts to coastlines, and though the arena tried to fail to remember them, the gunpowder nonetheless consists of their scent. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815, consumed Europe. Although the French Navy barred ladies from legit enlistment, 1,000s disguised themselves and joined campaigns from Austerlitz to Waterloo. Amongst them used to be Marie Therese Spiga, nicknamed La Sansgain. She joined the French military in male attire, served with honor, and finally grew to be a cavalry soldier. After Napoleon's fall, she published memoirs detailing her experiences, a rare first-person account of a woman in war. On the opposite aspect of the battlefield, British camp followers, more often than not brushed aside as mere baggage, carried out essential roles, nursing, laundering, and even helping reload muskets beneath fireplace. In 1848, Europe erupted. The so referred to as springtime of international locations saw uprisings in France, Italy, Germany, Hungary, and past. Peasants and intellectuals, scholars and infantrymen rose against autocracy, and ladies were among them. In Hungary, Countess Blanka Teleki was once arrested for innovative agitation. In Germany, Matilda Franziska Honecker helped lead the Baden Uprising, later fleeing to the US to recommend for women's suffrage and abolition. In France, women's political golf equipment have been formed spaces where women demanded rights, prepared resistance, and a few even picked up arms. Though most had been later crushed, their participation signaled a new political identity. Woman as citizen and fighter. The 19th century was once also the golden age of European imperialism. Anywhere empires expanded, women resisted. Rani Lakshmibai, the warrior queen of Indione, of the iconic female fighters of the century. Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi-led Indian resistance for the period of the 1857 First War of Independence, called the Sepoy Mutiny by using the British, widowed and denied the right to undertake an heir under British law. Lakshmibai raised a battalion and became a logo of uprising. Dressed in male attire, she led cavalry expenditures and fought the British teeth and nail. She died in battle at simply 29. Yaasantiwa, mom of the Ashanti Rebellion, 1900, and the tail finish of the century. Yaasantiwa, Queen Mother of the Ashanti Empire, cutting-edge day Ghana, led a rebellion against British demands to surrender the sacred golden stool, image of Ashanti sovereignty. In her famous conflict speech, she declared, "When you, the men of Ashanti, won't go forward, then we, the ladies, will battle." Her uprising was once ultimately beaten, and she or he was once exiled. However, her defiance lives on as a national legend. In the Americas, the fight towards slavery and racial oppression noticed women taking palms, both metaphorically and actually. Harriet Tubman, the overall of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman is remembered for guiding enslaved men and women to freedom. However, fewer recognize that she also served as a spy, scout, and army chief for the duration of the U.S. Civil Battle. In 1863, she led a Union raid at Combahee Ferry in South Carolina, freeing over 700 enslaved individuals. She stays the one girl in American history to steer a Navy day trip in the course of that battle. Women of the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. used to be the only successful slave rebellion in historical past, and ladies like Sanat, Belair, a lieutenant under Toussaint Louverture played key roles. Captured by using the French, she used to be achieved refusing to wear a blindfold and meeting demise with defiance. Conflict changed dramatically with the Crimean struggle, 1853 to 1856. Not simplest in procedures, however, in hospital treatment, and with it, ladies' roles changed. Florence Nightingale born into wealth. Nightingale bowled over her loved ones by means of making a choice on nursing. Sent to the Crimea, she revolutionized battlefield medicine, decreasing demise charges. Via hygiene in group, her nightly rounds earned her the title, the woman with the lamp. Her statistical studies and advocacy would lead to the creation of trendy nursing, making her now not best a caregiver, however, a military reformer. Mary Sickleoger Makenborn, Mary Sickle, was rejected with the aid of the British battle place of Job, so she funded her own trip to Crimea, developing a British lodge to maintain wounded infantrymen, close the entrance. Liked by way of troops, her bravery and care received acclaim, though she was virtually erased from respectable history. The American Civil War 1861-1865. Enormous quantities of ladies served and concealed, as squaddies historians estimate, over 400 documented circumstances. Some great figures include Sarah Edmonds, who enlisted as Franklin Thompson and served as a secret agent, Loretta Juanita Velasquez, who fought for the Confederacy and later published memoirs. Others served as battlefield nurses, saboteurs, and fundraisers. Their roles had been substantial, their sacrifices mostly hidden. European nationalist wars. For the period of wars for unification and independence, exceptionally in Italy and Poland, women joined innovative actions. Cristina Trivulzio di, an Italian noblewoman, funded and equipped troops for the period of the Italian unification. Polish females played key roles in uprisings against Russian and Prussian control, smuggling weapons and printing underground newspapers. The 19th century also noticed the upward push of prepared espionage, and women became primary as spies, couriers, and code-breakers. For the period of the Napoleonic Wars, French and British women operated as double dealers throughout European courts. In the American civil struggle, Rose O'Neal Greenhow, a Confederate secret agent in Washington, D.C., handed key intelligence to Southern leaders so easily that Jefferson Davis credited her with assisting the victory on the first combat of Bull Run. Although more commonly glamorized, espionage was once hazardous work. Many have been caught, imprisoned, or finished. But these women used society's assumptions that females were harmless or pacifized their finest weapons. Within the Boer Wars 1880 to 1881, 1899 to 1902, fought between the British Empire and Dutch-descended settlers in South Africa, ladies were both victims and combatants. Boer women, left in the back of as guys fought, regularly defended homesteads, cared for wounded combatants, and fashioned logistical networks. Others took up arms themselves. When the British instituted awareness camps for civilians, one of the crucial firsts of their type, hundreds and hundreds of females and kids perished. British nurses, too, served in brutal conditions, finding out hard lessons that may impact World War I medical care a decade later. Via the tip of the 19th century, the world stood on a precipice. Industrialization had mechanized loss of life. Colonialism had redrawn the map, and nationalism used to be aflame in each capital. Females had fought in every nook of the globe. They'd led rebellions, healed armies, spied for reasons, and died in Carrier II lands that refused to acknowledge them. World struggle I 1914 to 1918 was once not like any conflict the world had obvious. Complete warfare demanded whole participation throughout international locations, across classes, and across genders. With thousands of guys conscripted and shipped to the trenches, every nation within the war turned inward, looking to its civilian population to maintain society. Jogging and armies offered. Ladies answered the call, getting into roles once deemed unthinkable. They grew to be staff, spies, nurses, soldiers in conceal, and voices of resistance. If any role outlined ladies' contribution to WWI, it used to be nursing. But this was once no Florence Nightingale technology infirmary. WWI nurses labored close the front traces, most likely in area hospitals or cellular stations below consistent shell fire. British nurses with the voluntary Aid Detachment VAD served in both domestic hospitals and abroad. Australian and New Zealand Navy nursing provider Anzac nurses continued extreme conditions in Gallipoli and Egypt. American nurses, as soon as the US entered the conflict, flooded into Europe via war's end. Over 20,000 had served. French and Belgian nurses worked beneath regular siege in towns like Ypres and Verdun. These ladies dealt with horrifying wounds, gas burns, trench foot, amputations, shrapnel injuries. Some have been decorated for bravery underneath hearth, others not ever lower back dwelling. With the male group of workers at war, industrial nations became two ladies to energy the computer of present-day conflict. Munitions staffed the canary. Women in Britain and in other places. Women flocked to munitions factories working with poisonous chemicals to produce artillery shells, bullets, and explosives. The TNT grew to become their epidermis, yellow, earning them the nickname Canary Girls. Explosions had been fashioned. Stipulations were lethal, but they labored understanding that each shell they made would shop a soldier's life. Farmers, transporters, and people veils ran farms, operated trams and buses, delivered mail, and took over administrative jobs in colossal numbers. They grew to become essential, no longer simply to economies, but to national survival. Although barred from combat often, ladies formed authentic and semi-respectable army corps. The Ladies' Army Auxiliary Corps, WAAC, in Britain, was created in 1917. Females served as clerks, cooks, and drivers, freeing guys for fight roles. France's Les Marines de Guerre had been warfare godmothers, supplying emotional and normally logistical support to squaddies on the front. Russia, extra radically, allowed some ladies to serve in fight models, most famously in the Ladies' Battalion of Loss of Life, led by means of Maria Bot. In 1917, as the Russian Empire crumbled in revolution, one unit greatly surprised the sector. The Ladies' Battalion of Death, composed of over 2,000 volunteers, used to be created to disgrace conflictory Russian guys back into combating. Led by Maria Botchkareva, a peasant who had fought in the warfare from 1914, they served at the entrance and engaged in hand-to-hand fight. Though short-lived, their bravery used to be undeniable. They fought for the duration of the Kerensky offensive and held trenches even after male units fled. Eventually disbanded throughout the Bolshevik upward thrust, their story stays probably the most uncommon of the conflict. World War I additionally gave rise to feminine spies, masters of hide, seduction, and stealth. Mata Hari, the legend, and essentially the most noted, was once Mata Hari, a Dutch distinctive dancer performed by using the French in 1917 for allegedly spying for Germany. Whilst proof remains doubtful, her story grew to be legend. Of magnificence grew to become deadly. Of a woman weaponized through struggle. Louise de Betignissa weighs more strong and, not more known, was Louise de Betigness, a French intelligence agent who created an immense spy network for British forces in occupied France. Her community supplied relevant intel on German troop actions. Captured in 1915, she died in prison but saved numerous lives before her arrest. Throughout occupied territories, ladies led underground movements. In Belgium, women helped Allied squaddies break out throughout borders. In Serbia, Milanka Savic fought in conceal for years, earning the Legion of Honor and a couple of medals for bravery. Within the Center East, Arab females acted as couriers, smugglers, and informants in the British-backed rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. Polish, Irish, and Ukrainian females fought in nationalist revolts as empires fell. By the time the armistice used to be signed, on November 11, 1918, the arena was once transformed. 10 million useless empires long past, and women, thousands of them, had tasted a brand new sort of vigour. The conflict gave women the final push towards suffrage in many nations. Britain gave the vote to a couple women in 1918. Germany and Austria followed. The US would go the 19th Amendment in 1920. However, the rate used to be excessive. Many lower back to domestic roles. Others faced poverty, damage, and trauma. Their career used to be mostly forgotten in post-war parades dominated by generals and statesmen. World War I was not only a turning factor for geopolitics, but for gender. It proved what ladies had invariably known, that braveness wears many faces and strength many uniforms. World War II 1939 to 1945 was a world cataclysm that blurred each boundary between civilians and squaddies, between place of origin and battlefront, between gendered expectations and grim requirements. Nearly 100 million humans served. In Navy models, behind them stood billions whose labor, intelligence, and resilience saved nations alive. Ladies have been on the core of this international machine. In contrast to World Battle I, this was no longer just a story of stepping in for men, it was a narrative of seizing roles long denied, rewriting the principles of provider, and fitting icons of strength across cultures and continents. Narrator: this was once the second the world learned what females could do once they had nothing left to lose, however worry. 6.2 The arsenal of democracy. Ladies, on the dwelling frontiers, the battle raged throughout Europe and the Pacific. Females in Allied and Axis countries grew to be industrial warriors. Rosie the Riveter, more than a poster in the US. Over 6 million females entered the commercial staff producing planes, tanks, and ammunition. They worked as welders, electricians, and machinists. Rosie the Riveter wasn't just propaganda, she was actual. Women like Norma Jean Baker, before she grew to become Marilyn Monroe, inspected parachutes. Ladies built the bombers that flew over Europe. Some even died in factory explosions. Narrator: they didn't ask for credit. They asked for talk. Wrenches, British Land Girls, and the Ladies' Land Navy in Britain. Females joined the Ladies' Land Army to hold the nation fed for the duration of German blockades. These landwomen plowed, milked, harvested, and toiled at the same time. Luftwaffe planes flew overhead. Soviet feminine labor battalions in the United States. Females, more often than not, labored 12-hour shifts in munitions factories that dug anti-tank ditches with the aid of hand. Cities like Leningrad survived due to the fact that of ladies' labor and iron will for the duration of the brutal siege. Narrator: they held the again line so others might hold the entrance. 6.3 Women in uniform, reliable, and below hearth. WWI marked the primary time in modern historical past that hundreds of thousands of ladies wore army uniforms in equipped corps, probably working near fight. The Soviet Union, ladies in fight. No nation deployed ladies in fight as commonly as the Soviet Union. These weren't simply nurses, they had been snipers. Ladies like Ludmila Pavlichenko, with 309 established kills, grew to become feared on the Japanese entrance. Pilots, the Night Witches, an all-female bombing regiment, flew rickety biplanes on nighttime raids. Germans stated you would hear them like broomsticks in the wind. Tank operators, computer gunners, and partisans stuffed the Red Navy's depleted ranks. Narrator: they didn't just destroy gender obstacles, they broke enemy strains. Us, the Waves, WACs, and WASPs within the US. Women served in specific army branches. WACs, females' military corps. 150 served as clerks, radio operators, and cryptographers. Waves, Navy, females served in stateside technical and aid roles. WASPs, female pilots ferried planes across the country and demonstrated plane. Over 1,000 served, 38 died. They weren't given Navy fame until a long time later. United Kingdom, the ATS and SOI Auxiliary Territorial Service ATS. British women worked as anti-aircraft gun crews, mechanics, and drivers. Distinct operations executives. So, females were trained as spies, saboteurs, and radio operators at the back of enemy strains. Narrator: their weapons were typewriters and pistols. Their courage was categorized. 6. For ladies in resistance, actions through it, Nazi-occupied Europe. Ladies played principal roles in resistance networks. France, the Shadow Army. French females carried weapons, smuggled Jews, sabotaged rail strains, and gathered intelligence. Ladies like Lucy Aurbrock and Marie-Madeleine Fourcade have been leaders, now not just couriers. Narrator: in the silence of curfew, they plotted chaos. Poland, the key city, combatants in Poland. Women fought within the Warsaw Uprising, sewed uniforms, treated the wounded, and even executed collaborators. The Armia Krajowa Home Military relied on hundreds and hundreds of females. Yugoslavia and Greece, partisan queens in Yugoslavia, beneath Tito's communist partisans, females made up a third of the fighting drive. In Greece, women resisted Italian and German occupation from mountain hideouts. Narrator: in each occupied village, The whisper of resistance frequently came from a girl's mouth. 6.5 Ladies in the Holocaust, victims, combatants, witnesses. WWI used to be also the generation of genocide, and ladies have been at the heart of struggling, survival, and defiance in the Holocaust. Jewish women in ghettos like Warsaw taught kids, smuggled food, and organized uprisings. In concentration camps, ladies, doctors, and nurses risked their lives to handle others, ordinarily utilizing scraps and smuggled instruments. Feminine partisans like Faye Schulman, a Jewish resistance fighter and photographer, fought Nazis with one hand and documented their crimes with the opposite. Narrator: they noticed hell, and in its ashes they planted stories the world ought to never fail to remember. 6.6 Within the Pacific and Asia reports, much less told ladies also performed principal roles within the Pacific Theater. Filipino guerrillas, lots of them females, fought Jap forces for the period of occupation. Chinese language women were a part of resistance networks towards Jap invaders. Remedy females, a tragic and horrific chapter, involved the pressured sexual slavery of tens of thousands of ladies, specifically Korean, Chinese language, and Southeast Asian, by using the Japanese Navy. Some survivors would now not converse for decades. Others spent their lives annoying justice. Narrator: somber. On this warfare, many ladies became warriors. Others have been made into weapons, and all bore the wounds. 6.7 The conflict ends, but the combat continues with the Axis powers. Defeated in 1945, thousands of females had been ordered to come back to home life. In Britain, the US, and elements of Europe, their uniforms were packed away. Their heroism used to be generally erased or downplayed in post-war celebrations, dominated with the aid of male generals. But now, not in every single place in the United States, female veterans have been honored, though mainly nonetheless restricted in post-war society. In Israel, many Holocaust survivors who had resisted would go on to become a member of the battle for independence. In the USA and the UK, ladies began demanding permanent equality, their conflict work having proved their ability. Narrator: they had been asked to disappear. However, the fire they lit could no longer be unlit. 6.8 Legacy of World War II females. WWI didn't just mark women's contribution, it redefined their presence in national identification. Their work laid foundations for second-wave feminism in the West. Their bravery motivated laws, memorials, and eventually attention. Their silence, in many circumstances, grew to become the loudest ancient injustice. Narrator: they weren't aspect notes. They were steel threads on the planet's unraveling. 6.9 Closing thoughts. A war remembered, otherwise. Narrator: quietly strong, once we believe, of World Warfare II. We see guys storming shores, generals making speeches, dictators screaming into microphones. However, under that noise have been ladies loading bombs, decoding messages, hiding fugitives, stitching wounds, death in shadows. Their names might not be on statues. However, their fingerprints are on every inch of freedom left standing. After 1945, the world broke up into two ideological blocks: capitalism versus communism, NATO versus Warsaw Percent, United States of America versus US. However, the true story played out within the international South. The place international locations, long under colonial rule, started out to fight for his or her independence, whilst men grew to become the faces of rebellion. Ladies had been traditionally its beating coronary heart. Narrator: they did not look ahead to permission. They wrote their names in fireplace on the pages of revolution. 7.2 Algeria, the female faces of battle. The Algerian struggle of independence, 1954 to 1962, against French colonial rule, was once brutal. Over 1 million individuals died, and females were deeply concerned no longer as bystanders, but as warring parties and urban guerrillas. The ladies of the FLN, the Entrance de Liberation Nationale FLN, expert ladies to smuggle weapons, plant bombs in cafes, cross messages, and aid troops in the discipline. Jamila Bohayed, a young woman from Agut, loved ones, was once captured and tortured by the French. After a bombing, she grew to become a logo of resistance throughout the Arab world. Zora Beth, a college scholar, disguised herself as a EU and planted bombs for the period of the combat of Algiers. Narrator: they didn't wear medals, they wore veils. and below these veils, defiance burned. 7.3 Vietnam War in the rice fields, and within the jungle. The Vietnam War 1955 to 1975 is on the whole informed by means of the lens of US soldiers. However, Vietnamese ladies played distinctive roles. North Vietnam and the Viet Cong ladies served in combat models, manned anti-aircraft guns, constructed and repaired roads on the Ho Chi Minh Path, and labored as intelligence retailers. Female squaddies almost always disguised themselves as peasants, even as engaging in sabotage missions. One of the iconic photos of the warfare is Nguyen Thi Dinh, a feminine basic within the Viet Cong and co-founder of the lengthy-haired army, a resistance team made utterly of ladies. South Vietnam and the US allies, even on the South Vietnamese and American sides, females served as nurses, translators, and field help dealers. American ladies in uniform braved jungle conditions to treat the wounded, customarily at extreme private chance. Narrator: in the inexperienced hell of Southeast Asia, females became squaddies of survival and symbols of battle. 7. For Africa Rising, ladies in liberation movements. As Africa erupted with decolonization movements from the 1950s by way of the 1980s, females helped tear down empires with rifles, pens, and protest songs. Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, and countries like Mozambique and Angola, Marxist-oriented insurgent corporations incorporated huge numbers of ladies of their fighting ranks. The Frelimo and MPLA movements trained feminine guerrillas alongside men. In Zimbabwe, women in Zamu fought against white minority rule in Rhodesia, residing in forests, accomplishing and coaching others. South Africa, apartheid's fiercest critics in the course of the apartheid years. Females like Winnie Mandela and Albertina Sisulu helped organize protests, cover activists, and coordinate underground networks. Narrator: colonial masters fell, but it surely was customarily ladies who loosened the first bricks. 7.5 Latin, the United States, guerrilleros and grandmothers from Cuba to Nicaragua to Argentina. Females stood at the front lines of revolution, repression, and remembrance. Cuba, the 26th of July action ladies, like Celia Sanchez and Haiti Santamaria, had been shut confidants and commanders in Fidel Castro's revolution. They planned attacks, hid weapons, and served in fight. After the revolution, women grew to become important in Cuba's military and ideological equipment. Nicaragua, Sandinista women in Nicaragua. The Sandinista Countrywide Liberation Front fielded female combatants who helped overthrow the Somoza dictatorship. Females like Dora Maria Taylors grew to be struggle commanders of their 20s. Argentina, the mums of the Plaza de Mayo, yet another war. Certainly one of silence and terror. Mums protested the disappearance of hundreds of thousands. Beneath Argentina's army junta, sporting white scarves, they marched weakly, retaining up images of their kids, refusing to be silenced. Narrator: in jungles, deserts, and plazas, they fought normally with guns, sometimes with grief. 7.6 Israel and the Arab world, difficult roles in conflicted lands. Mid-20th century noticed a number of wars across the core East, and females discovered themselves in diverse, most often conflicting roles. Israel, obligatory provider, and fight pioneers. Give that 1948, Israeli women were conscripted into the army, at the same time, firstly constrained to support roles. Some served as pilots, sharpshooters, and intelligence marketers, peculiarly for the period of the 1948 Arab-Israeli warfare and later conflicts, Palestinian resistance and identity. Women, mainly in the course of the First Intifada, 1987 to 1993, geared up civil resistance, protests, and underground networks. Some took up fingers, others ran faculties, clinics, and authorized support operations underneath occupation. Egypt, Lebanon, Syria. Ladies in these nations usually joined secular nationalist actions, appearing as spies, smugglers, and political leaders. The legacy of those females remains politically charged, however undeniable. Narrator: their battlefield was probably the residence, the schoolroom, the checkpoint, but their combat was every bit as fierce. 7.7 Bloodless battle, covert ops, feminine spies and defector space. The Cold War simmered. Intelligence agencies on all sides became too ladies to infiltrate, seduce, steal, and continue to exist. Soviet and Jap bloc spies, the KGB, knowledgeable ladies in psychological manipulation and language expertise, deploying them as swallows in honey trap missions across Europe. CIA and MI6 agents, Western corporations, also employed females as operatives, analysts, and handlers. Though commonly hidden behind codenames, their work formed the fates of international locations. Narrator: in the back of each Iron Curtain was a woman preserving a key and a digital camera. 7. 8. The price of participation. Lots of cases, women were excluded from post-war energy. Guerrillas had been told to come to the kitchen. Secret agent identities had been sealed, by no means to be recounted. Female infantrymen had been brushed aside without medals, in most cases even without pensions. But in each corner of the globe, these ladies laid the groundwork for post-war social and political actions. Education, reform, healthcare systems, feminist political parties, human rights tribunals. Narrator: they bled for liberation, then they bled once more to be remembered. 7.9. Closing reflections. The revolution continues. Narrator: quiet, passionate. The bloodless war can have ended. The empires may have fallen, but the battles women fought for dignity, equality, and remembrance are far from over. In the jungles of Angola and the prisons of Hanoi, within the alleys of Algiers and the plazas of Buenos Aires, they proved that conflict does now not simply damage, it additionally reveals. And what it published was that ladies have been not ever the footnotes of historical past. They had been its rebel heartbeat. The breakup of Yugoslavia within the 1990s unleashed a sequence of brutal conflicts across Bosnia, Croatia, and Kosovo. The wars have been marked by using genocide, mass rape, ethnic cleansing, and a brand new visibility for ladies, both as victims and opponents. Victims of systematic rape in Bosnia, an estimated 20,000 to 50,000 females were subjected to sexual violence. On the whole, in rape camps, for the first time in modern-day historical past, rape used to be prosecuted as a weapon of battle by way of the International Crook Tribunal for the previous Yugoslavia, ICTY. Survivors like Bakira Hasisic grew to become advocates, leading investigations and pushing for global justice. Ladies as soldiers and commandersolth, not the majority. Ladies fought in each side of the conflict: Croatian militia, the Bosnian Navy, and even paramilitary items. Some served as snipers, medics, engineers, and intelligence sellers. Kosovo, liberation, military, KLA, had female combatants, some of whom later entered politics and diplomacy. Narrator: in the coronary heart of Europe, females skilled war not simply in physique, however, in spirit, and converted trauma into testimony. 8. To Rwanda, a genocide and a gendered response. In 1994, Rwanda witnessed probably the most worst genocides of the 20th century, as nearly 800,000 folks were slaughtered in 100 days. But within the aftermath, Rwanda would emerge as a worldwide illustration of females rising from ashes to steer. Survivors and witnesses: Tutsi ladies had been disproportionately targeted for sexual violence and homicide, yet many survived and later testified at the Global Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR. The ICTR made legal historical past by recognizing rape as a form of genocide. Established on the memories of female survivors, a nation rebuilt by using women. In these days, Rwanda has probably the most perfect percentages of females in parliament in the world. Over 60%. Women-led group courts, Gokaka, helped reunite orphans and restructured the health approach. Former genocide survivors became ministers, police chiefs, and entrepreneurs. Narrator: they rebuilt no longer simplest their nation but the legal language of accountability. 8.3. The Core East. From the Gulf War to the struggle on terror, struggled back to the Middle East in waves. Ladies emerged in surprising and customarily contradictory roles as infantrymen, insurgents, peacebuilders, and political leaders. The Gulf War, 1990-1991 for the U.S. The Gulf Warfare marked the primary predominant clash in which significant numbers of feminine service members had been deployed in fight zones. Over 50 American females served in aid and logistics, facing Scud missile assaults and the same dangers as their male counterparts. Iraq and Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021. After 9/11, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. For too many years, women participated at exceptional phases in the U.S. military. They served as combat medics, MPs, engineers, and fighter pilots in Iraq and Afghanistan. Feminine infantrymen performed feminine engagement teams to arrive, regional females who male soldiers couldn't interact with due to cultural boundaries. Females in insurgencies. Women also fought on the opposite side. In Iraq, some grew to become suicide bombers or joined extremist corporations like ISIS. In Afghanistan, Taliban resistance traditionally exact female educators and journalists. Afghan females' upward thrust and retreat between 2001 and 2021. Afghan females surged into public existence, becoming academics, television anchors, MPs. But after the Taliban's return in 2021, many have been stripped of rights in a single day. Narrator: within the shadows of superpowers, ladies made beneficial properties, but peace proved fragile and freedom reversible. 8. For the Kurdish opponents, females as armies in the center-east view. Portraits have reshaped the narrative of women in warfare, like those of the Kurdish females as defense. Models YPJ, the Syrian civil conflict, and ICS as ISIS spread terror. Throughout Iraq and Syria, Kurdish women rose to fight again. The YPJ all-feminine fight items in Rojava, northern Syria, played a key function within the combat of Kobane, 2015. Their braveness shocked the world. Lots of them young adults or farmers grew to become squaddies. Ideology and feminism. The Kurdish Freedom Action, encouraged by means of Abdullah Öcalan's democratic confederalism, promoted gender equality as an innovative purpose. In liberated areas, they instituted co-management, legal guidelines requiring one male and one female leader in each and every position. Narrator: they did not only battle for land, but for a brand new type of society. 8. 5 ladies in peacekeeping and peacebuilding as conflicts ravaged international locations. Women increasingly grew to be peacekeepers now, not simply soldiers. However, mediators and architects of peace. UN peacekeeper Stractor ladies joined UN peacekeeping forces, working in DR Congo, South Sudan, Haiti, and Lebanon. Tasks incorporated conflict, mediation, defending civilians, and investigating sexual violence. UN Resolution 1325, 2000 and 2000. The United Countries passed Resolution 1325, recognizing the need for ladies' full participation in conflict, decision and peace techniques, due to the fact that then, females have performed pivotal roles in peace talks in Colombia, Liberia, and Philippines. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, President of Peace in Liberia, a nation ravaged by means of civil conflict. Women's movements led mass protests and peace campaigns. GBOI, a Liberian activist, geared up a peaceful females' protest that pushed warlords to the desk. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf later grew to become Africa's first elected feminine head of state and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Narrator: they put down weapons and picked up constitutions. 8. 6 female journalists, humanitarian employees, and whistleblower. Salot warfare can be formed through those who file, heal, and reveal it. Marie Colvin, an American conflict journalist, was killed in Syria after a long time of frontline reporting. Medical professionals without boundary lines, MSF, and other NGOs count closely on females in excessive chance zones. Whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning converted the dialogue on wartime ethics and accountability. Narrator: truth grew to become an extra battlefield, and women walked into it with open eyes. 8. 7. The struggles that remain regardless of advances. Challenges persist. Sexual violence remains to be used as a weapon of warfare. Feminine veterans face mental well-being problems, discrimination, and homelessness. Women are still underrepresented in peace negotiations, however they keep pushing. Narrator: the struggle for dignity under no circumstances ends. It handiest changes fronts. 8. 8 closing reflections from forgotten to foundational. Narrator: delicate, however firm. The modern-day woman in conflict is no longer a footnote. She's a fighter, a leader, a judge, a healer. She will not be an adjunct to conflict. She is a central agent in its causes, direction, and penalties. From Rwanda's reconciliation courts to Kurdish battlegrounds, from bombed hospitals to bulletproof parliaments, she has stood tall, no longer as a sufferer of historical past, however as a maker of it. For the duration of World Warfare II, The French resistance was once a mosaic of clandestine cells fighting Nazi occupation and Vichy collaboration. Females served as couriers, intelligence gatherers, saboteurs, and even opponents. Figures like Lucy Aubrac risked the whole thing, organizing daring prison breaks and transmitting central information. Many had been tortured and carried out, but their bravery fueled the liberation. Narrator, invisible to the enemy, necessary to the motive. 9.2 The Indian independence motion, the spirit of Satyagraha's combat for freedom from British colonial rule saw remarkable females leaders. Rani Lakshmi, the Queen of Jhansi, fought with sword and technique in the course of the 8th uprising, inspiring generations. Later, Sarojini Naidu and Kasturba Gandhi played key roles in peaceable protests and civil disobedience campaigns. Females from villages to cities marched, spun khadi, and faced imprisonment. Narrator, their weapon used to be non-violence. However, their courage used to be revolutionary. 9.3 The Cuban Revolution, guerrilla Ross on the mountain. The Cuban Revolution 1953 to 1959 introduced ladies to the forefront. Fighters like Celia Sanchez and Haydee Santamaria had been architects of guerrilla procedure and concrete resistance. They had been educated in weapons, logistics, and political education. Published Revolution. Many persevered as leaders in Cuba's political and social transformations. Narrator, they carried rifles and desires, forging new paths in dense jungles and dense politics. 9.4 South Africa's anti-apartheid motion. Females in opposition to segregation, ladies like Winnie Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, and countless unnamed activists led protests, underground networks, and neighborhood organizing. The Women's March of 1956, with over 20,000 individuals, grew to be a defining second. Women confronted brutal repression, detention without trial, and exile. Their efforts laid the groundwork for eventual democratic transformation. Narrator, they grew to become grief into resistance and suffering into energy. 9.5 Latin, American Guerrilleras Revolution and Repression Addis. In Latin, the U.S. took up hands and voices against dictatorship and inequality. In Nicaragua, Dora Maria Taylor used to be a commander within the Sandinista Revolution. In Argentina, the Madres de Plaza de Mayo converted maternal grief into political activism. Throughout the continent, ladies faced disappearance, torture, and exile. Narrator, in silence and screams, they rewrote the witch means of motherhood and militancy. 9.6 The Palestinian Struggle, Women Between Conflict and Hope. Palestinian ladies have been imperative to resistance efforts, both armed and civil. From Leila Khalad, one of the most first feminine hijackers, to grassroots organizers in refugee camps, females managed social services, education, and protests amid occupation. Their studies are commonly marginalized, however, stay strong. Narrator, in a land divided, their unity grew to become an act of rebellion. 9.7 The Irish Troubles, Women in the Battle for Identity in Northern Ireland. Women performed elaborate roles for the period of the Troubles, late 60s, 1998. Some, like Dolores Fee, engaged in militant moves, including bombings and hunger strikes. Others acted as negotiators, peace activists, and community leaders. The Ladies for Peace Action worked tirelessly to finish violence. Narrator, caught between violence and hope. Females held the delicate threads of reconciliation. 9.8 Indigenous resistance movements, from the Zapatistas in Mexico to Native American activists within the U.S. Indigenous females have fought for sovereignty, land rights, and cultural survival. Figures like Comandante Ramona led armed uprisings. Activists protested environmental destruction and systemic violence. Their struggles join ancient wisdom with contemporary resistance. Narrator, their combat is for the earth, their persons, and their future. 9.9 The cost paid, sacrifice, silencing, and survival. Throughout all these movements, ladies confronted unique dangers. Torture and sexual violence have been usually used to interrupt resistance. After victories, women had been generally sidelined. In official histories, many paid with their lives, their freedom, or lifelong trauma. Narrator, they carried scars invisible to the sector, however inconceivable to erase. 9.10 Legacy and classist women's resistance shaped the path of international locations and prompted international actions for justice. Their experience is assignment, traditional narratives of battle and power. They highlight the intersection of gender, politics, and conflict. Their courage continues to inspire new generations to upward thrust. Narrator, in the coronary heart of uprising beats the heartbeat of a girl's braveness and unyielding, unstoppable. Women's entrance into struggle journalism used to be fraught with limitations. Nellie Bly, within the late 19th century, broke taboos with undercover reporting for the duration of conflicts. Martha Gellhorn, one of the vital first feminine correspondents, in World War II, famously landed on Normandy seashores hours after D-Day. Marguerite Higgins, an additional trailblazer, protected the Korean War and won a Pulitzer Prize. Despite skepticism, these females proved their courage in front lines and challenged the male-dominated press. Narrator, they refused to be silenced with the aid of bullets or biases. 10.2 Vietnam Struggle. The feminine eyes of a divided conflictor. Vietnam warfare used to be probably the most first conflicts generally protected by means of TV and print journalism. Ladies like Kate Webb and Denise Chong pronounced from the jungles, bases, and refugee camps. They documented the brutality of warfare and the human studies in the back of information. Female journalists traditionally confronted discrimination, but gained recognized for his or her fearless reporting. Narrator, they noticed the struggle by way of one of a kind, eyes compassionate, relentless, unflinching. 10. 3 photojournalists shooting struggles. Raw reality photography has shaped our collective memory of war, and females photographers performed an essential role. Margaret Bourke-White, World War II's first feminine struggle correspondent, took iconic pics of businesswood and humans struggling. Susan Meiselas documented the Nicaraguan Revolution and struggles invaluable the United States. Lindsay Edibio, a present-day photojournalist, has included Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya at high-quality private threat. Narrator, one click on of the shutter can speak louder than 1,000 words, and ladies had been behind that lens. 10. For radio and television, females' voices within the airwaves from world struggle to announces to modern-day reporting. Females have used radio and TV to notify and affect. Vera Lynn, the force's sweetheart, boosted morale throughout World War II with her singing and publicizes. Female broadcasters in clash zones offered information to infantrymen and civilians alike. In these days, women anchor primary global news retailers, reporting live from struggle zones, regardless of threats. Narrator, their voices reduced through the static of warfare, carrying reality into homes and hearts. 10.5 Embedded reporters. Practically the frontline studies warfare, almost always, includes embedded journalists, newshounds, attached to army models. Ladies embedded with troops in Iraq and Afghanistan brought again vivid bills of fight and civilian life. They faced risks of ambush, kidnapping, and PTSD. Their stories introduced nuance and humanity to traditionally politicized conflicts. Narrator, they stroll alongside squaddies, yet remain observers bearing witness to history unfolding. 10.6 Challenges and sacrifice. Famine. Struggle correspondents face special challenges, harassment and threats from fighters and locals. Struggles balancing household and profession in hazardous environments. Intellectual well-being challenges from publicity to trauma. Many have paid the perfect fee. Marie Colvin, an American journalist, was once killed protecting the siege of Homs in Syria. Others had been kidnapped or injured in conflict zones. Narrator, the cost of truth is on the whole measured in blood and silence. 10.7 Ladies as storytellers past the front. Struggle stories are additionally shaped via female survivors, novelists, filmmakers, and historians. And Historian's Diary remains some of the poignant private money, ode of warfare and persecution. Filmmakers, like Catherine Bigelow, have introduced ladies' views on warfare to international audiences. Historians have begun rewriting narratives to incorporate females' experiences in fight, housefront, and aftermath. Narrator, they preserve no voices lost to historical past's dustbin. 10. 8. The vigor of the pen and the lens the reports ladies inform have an effect on public opinion, coverage, and historical past itself. Their reporting has exposed war crimes, fueled humanitarian efforts, and forced governments. Feminine journalists have spotlighted sexual violence, displacement, and the plight of refugees. Via their work, the arena features a full, extra sincere photograph of conflicts, charges, and consequences. Narrator, within the theater of warfare, women preserve a replica to humanity, reflecting its worst and its hope. 10.9 Closing reflections. Bearing witness, bearing burden, gentle, resonant. To tell the story of struggle is to keep its wounds for your hands. Females who have finished this, who've braved gunfire and grief to deliver us reality, are unsung heroes. For without their eyes and voices, history might be written in silence and lies. During history, the enormous majority of battle victims were civilians, with females and children disproportionately affected. Bombing campaigns, forced displacements, sieges, and blockades almost always precise or devastated civilian populations. Ladies endured starvation, disease, lack of loved ones' members, and give way of social programs. In lots of conflicts, ladies became heads of households in a single day. Narrator, battle does now not discriminate. However, its burdens traditionally fall heaviest on people who build lifestyles from rubble. 11. Refugees and displacement war creates substantial refugee crises, with hundreds of thousands of ladies fleeing violence and looking for security. From world conflict, the seconds displaced men and women camps, to recent conflicts in Syria, Yemen, and South Sudan. Females have led journeys across deserts, seas, and borders. Refugee women frequently face gender-centered violence, exploitation, and restrained entry to healthcare and schooling, but they organize aid networks, train youngsters, and hold hope amid uncertainty. Narrator, when the arena closes its doorways, women to find approaches to open new ones. 11.3 Sexual violence as a weapon of warfare. Of the vital, devastating, and horrifying features of conflict has been using sexual violence as a deliberate tactic, from the relief women of World War II to mass rapes in Rwanda and Bosnia. Countless females had been brutalized. This violence is used to terrorize communities, ruin social material, and manipulate. Survivors traditionally face stigma and silence, but have ended up increasingly vocal in seeking justice. Narrator, somber. Within the darkest moments, females as our bodies grew to be battlefields where the struggle for dignity used to be fought in silence. 11.4 Women as caregivers and neighborhood leaders within the chaos of struggle. Women most likely emerge as the foremost caregivers, tending to the wounded, feeding families, and sustaining communities. For the duration of sieges like Leningrad or Sarajevo, females organized underground kitchens and scientific clinics. In published conflict societies, females rebuild social offerings, schools, and healthcare. They usually spearhead grassroots peacebuilding efforts. Narrator, when guns fall silent, it is women who decide upon the pieces and the future. 11.5 Ladies' position in post-warfare reconstruction after wars finish. Rebuilding societies is an enormous task, one where ladies play critical roles. In Europe, after each world wars, women labored in agriculture, enterprise, and education to revive shattered economies. In Rwanda and Bosnia, women's corporations have fostered reconciliation and trauma therapy. Ladies' participation in politics traditionally raises for the period of reconstruction, pushing for extra inclusive governance. Narrator, from the ashes of destruction, women sow seeds of hope and renewal. 11.6 Cultural renovation and memory. Males are most of the time the custodians of collective memory, maintaining traditions, reviews, and identities threatened through conflict. Through oral histories, art, tune, and ritual, females hold cultural continuity. They face up to makes an attempt to erase histories and reclaim their narratives. This cultural work underpins treatment and resilience. Narrator, they keep the past in their hearts, so it'll advise of the future. 11.7 Challenges and obstacles at their critical roles. Females, civilians face colossal limitations, restrained entry to political vigor and assets, societal norms that restrict their voices, ongoing threats of violence and discrimination. Narrator, even in peace, the battle for awareness and rights continues. 11.8 Studies of courage and hope across time and place. Countless females have embodied resilience. The females who hid Jewish kids for the duration of the Holocaust, mums in conflict zones who demand justice for disappeared loved ones, activists who crusade against landmines, youngster infantrymen, and warfare profiteering. Their stories inspire international movements for peace and justice. Narrator. In each corner of battle's desert, women find ways to nurture lifestyles. 11:9. Closing reflections. The heartbeat of humanity. Narrator. Heat. Resolute. War could smash bones and burn cities. Nevertheless, it cannot break the spirit of individuals who refuse to surrender. Ladies, as survivors, caregivers, and leaders, raise humanity ahead, reminding us that amid destruction, hope endures. Traditionally, ladies' army participation was frequently constrained to nursing, clerical work, and logistics. Throughout the American Civil Warfare, ladies disguised themselves as men to battle, but most served as nurses and aides. In World Struggle II, female-staffed hospitals, drove ambulances, and labored in communication models, just like the Women's Army Corps, WAC, within the US and the Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS, in Britain, expanded females' presence. Narrator. Behind the front lines they saved countless lives, displaying that courage wears many uniforms. 12.2. Breaking into fight roles. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw most important shifts as ladies commenced to enter combat and fight help roles. Nations like Israel and Norway have long conscription for females, integrating them utterly into military. Within the US, females served in fight zones during the Gulf struggle and later conflicts, at first in support roles, however increasingly in entrance line positions. Groundbreaking rulings and policy alterations opened combat aviation, infantry, and designated forces to females. Narrator. Not relegated to the sidelines, females stepped into the hearth. 12.3. Elite units and specific force. Women's inclusion in elite Navy units stays one of the difficult frontiers. In up-to-date years, ladies have accomplished rigorous coaching for particular operations roles. Feminine pilots fly combat missions. Snipers serve in frontline units. International locations equivalent to Canada, Australia, and the UK have steadily integrated females into elite forces. Narrator. Breaking stereotypes one grueling mile at a time. 12. For leadership and command. Females ascent to excessive rating. Army management is changing military tradition and approach. Female generals and admirals now command troops and lead operations worldwide. Their views generally bring concentration to disorders like sexual harassment, mental health, and loved ones' help. Management roles allow females to shape military insurance policies and doctrines. Narrator. Their upward thrust reshapes now, not simply who fights, however, how wars are waged. 12.5. Challenges and resistance. Development. Females in the military still face limitations. Gender discrimination and harassment persist. Balancing military careers with loved ones' lifestyles remains a challenge. In some nations, cultural resistance limits ladies' participation. Narrator. The battle for equality is ongoing, each on and off the battlefield. 12.6. Ladies veterans, serving past provider. Women who serve face exact publish army challenges, addressing PTSD, access to healthcare, and cognizance. Veteran advocacy groups center of attention on females' problems. Experiences of females veterans reveal resilience and sacrifice past the uniform. Narrator. Their service does not finish with discharge, it continues in rebuilding lives. 12.7. The long run toward real integration of forces. International increasingly appreciate the worth of various views. Efforts to recruit, preserve, and promote ladies proceed. Gender integration improves operational effectiveness and concord. Experiences shape peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. Narrator. As obstacles fall, the future of struggle and peace is inclusive and improved. 12.8. Closing reflections. Defying limits. Narrator. Uplifting. Decided. From battlefield medics to combat commanders, females have tested over and over that courage knows no gender. Their journey inside the militia is a testament to force, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of equality. For hundreds of years, women's contributions to conflict have been marginalized or erased. Reliable histories concerned with male infantrymen and generals. Ladies' roles had been brushed aside as secondary or anecdotal. Simplest lately have historians, governments, and societies begun to honor their sacrifices. Narrator. To bear in mind is to revive justice, to ensure no hero stays invisible. 13. 2 monuments, museums, and memorials throughout the globe. Monuments and museums committed to females in battle are emerging. The Ladies in Military Carrier for the United States Memorial in Washington, D.C. The Monument to the Females of World Conflict 2 in London. Nearby memorials honoring feminine resistance fighters, nurses, and veterans. These spaces foster attention, schooling, and admire. Narrator, stone and bronze, inform stories, but so do dwelling voices. 13. 3 education and historic revision curricula are evolving to include ladies' warfare experiences. Faculties integrate narratives of feminine squaddies, spies, and civilians. Documentaries, books, and films bring these studies to wider audiences. Feminist historians undertaking normal battle, narratives, and gender biases. Narrator histories pages are increasing to include these once written out. 13. For women veterans at present, cognizance and health males. Veterans proceed to recommend for equal access to healthcare, intellectual health services, and advantages. Realization of gender-precise challenges like Navy sexual trauma. Inclusion in veteran leadership and policymaking. Narrator, their battles extend past the battlefield to attention and healing. 13.5 The role of females in constructing peace. Women leadership in peace approaches and conflict prevention is more and more well known. The United Countries and NGOs promote ladies' participation as most important to lasting peace. Grassroots, females' companies mediate conflicts, rebuild communities, and suggest for justice. Their voices provide new pathways towards reconciliation. Narrator, peace shouldn't be merely the absence of battle, however the presence of justice, inclusion, and dignity. 13.6 The path ahead, honoring courage, making certain equality the experience towards full recognition and equality continues. Encouraging more females to serve and lead in armed forces, addressing systemic discrimination and violence, keeping and promoting females' reports to encourage future generations. Narrator, by using honoring their braveness, we shape a future where no hero is forgotten, where each story concerns. 13.7 Closing reflections, a tribute to the forgotten heroes. Narrator, heat, resolute, from ancient battlegrounds to modern-day conflicts. Ladies have fought with valor and resilience, often unseen, typically unsung, but their legacy endures in the lives they saved, the freedoms they won, and the hope they sparked. That is their story, the story of ladies in warfare, the forgotten heroes of history, now remembered, now honored, and by no means once more forgotten. Closing scene. The monitor fades to a slow montage of portraits of females warriors, nurses, activists, and survivors across history. The reveal dims to black, with the words, "Dedicated to all females who fought, continued, and prompted. Your story lives on."